All right, welcome to another Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Matt, Kathryn, and I are going to talk about what makes a great opening. So your stories need to hook a reader. We've all heard that before, but what does that mean? And how do you hook a reader? What actually does it take to get a reader invested in your story in that first page? Or better yet, that first sentence?
Yeah. So people always suggest that you start in media res, like in the middle of something.
Mm-hmm.
But I was taking a short story workshop recently, and the teacher kept saying that you need depth in openings, as in depth of character. So instead of starting in the middle of action, where you don't really know what's going on, you don't have any emotional investment in the character, you should start with depth of character so that when you get to the action, the reader cares about what's happening.
True, but let's define in media res first, because it doesn't mean start in the middle of action, like start with a burning building or start with someone falling off a cliff, although you could. What it means is start your story where the action of the story begins, because too often writers start with their setup, and they're really giving the reader the pre-writing, where they are trying to front-load information and say, this is who my character is, and this is what my setting is, and this is the kind of stuff you need to know before you get into the story. And we want you to start in the story. And then all of that information becomes revealed and unfolded as the story progresses. So in media res just means don't front load your setup. Start with story.
Right.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So the example I was given was, if you start the story with two characters talking and you haven't introduced the characters yet, it's not necessarily going, it could, but it's not necessarily going to hook the reader, because the reader doesn't know who those characters are or what their motivations are or why it matters, like why this conversation matters.
True. So, gosh, this is such a complex topic. It seems really simple on the surface, but it's really a matter of layering meaning into those opening lines, so you can you could begin with characters and dialogue, but you need to have something important, something imminent and grabbing about that dialogue, something that shows a reader why we care about these people. Right. Something
characterizing in the dialogue, right? Not just dialogue about what's happening, or a dialogue about some part of the plot, right? If you don't know who this character is, you have no reason to be invested in them.
Right, but you're getting to know them as the story opens. So what's coming to mind is the opening of The Murder in Skog Hall. It's a prologue, and it's in the killer's point of view, and he is a man in the dark, standing behind a car, staring up at a house, watching a woman through the picture window of her living room as she moves around. So she's well lit because it's night outside, and you care about this because you know this woman who's home alone, who's, like anyone, kind of a girl next door, like she could be you, she could be me. She's in danger, and we don't know what this man intends for her, but it's creepy, and we're inside his head, so he's troubled. So it's the situation, and she's immediately relatable because she's just a person at home doing her thing, like anyone.
So that prologue is from his perspective, right? His point of view, and it doesn't start with dialogue. It starts with his internal dialogue, and it goes straight down into. So this is what when they say depth in openings, right? That opening was great because you took us right into his PTSD, his trauma, his background in the war, and that's really deep. You just you took the reader from nothing, from this situation where obviously there's some danger involved, and straight down into this character who is very uncomfortable to be in.
Right. Right.
And so that's all the depth. But in my mind, that didn't start with dialogue, right? It started with his internal
No, it didn't start with dialogue, and I'm glad you said that, because you just I was really thinking about Bonnie as the character that we identify with, but you're right. We go into the head of Carl, the antagonist, and so that is very much depth of character with making the reader uncomfortable being situated in this guy's thoughts. But at the same time, the one we're worried about is Bonnie. We know he's going to be okay because he's the one who will do the harming and not be harmed. So there's kind of a juxtaposition there between which character we're going deep into and which character we sympathize with.
Yeah. But I don't even think it matters necessarily which character matters for your story, as long as you have some depth in your opening, right? Something to pull the reader down into that and say, like, now you need to know what happens, right? Like, you need to find out what happens, because even though Bonnie is the main character.
Well, she's the victim.
Well, right. So, so neither of those people are even the main character in that story, but because I don't know what happens, I keep reading.
Right, which brings us to intrigue. So depth is somebody else's word. And what I'm concerned with when I see an opening is intrigue. So that's one of my words I'm always using is intrigue. And intrigue is any unresolved question that you lead the reader to ask by laying out your clues, your information, your scenarios on the page. So in that opening we're talking about, it's obviously what's going to happen to that woman in the house. What is this guy with PTSD and war trauma going to do? That's the intrigue. And that's why you turn the page, because you need to find out what's going to happen between these two characters. Yeah. Yeah. And
I almost feel like you need both, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think depth is a good word, and it's a good concept to play with. But if everybody has a different definition of depth, then you can lead to confusion instead of clarity. So what were you going to say, Kathryn?
I always think of it as fascination, like if I'm fascinated by the character, or like in different things, different genres, different things. So like a lot of times in fantasy, it's I'm fascinated by what they're setting up. Like a good an example that comes to my mind is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, where like the first opening bit is it's raining ash and it's normal, and you're immediately like fascinated by what this character is going through in this world that you have no idea. And so it does that intrigue, that why is this going on, what is happening. And then in character driven genres, like fascinated by what they're going through or why they are the way that they are. So like the fascination part is the part where I see the depth. It's like, if you can get me down to that point where I actually care and I'm like, whoa, like I want to know more, then that's kind of where you need to be in terms of hooking and opening. So I don't think there's like any one given thing per genre. It's like different things, different stories, different levels of depth, whether it's character or setting or wonder or, different things that draw people in.
Right. Well, I think the intrigue or fascination can come from any element of story, but I do agree with what Matt was saying before the call, that depth of character is critical to any opening, because we as people empathize with people, and you can't empathize with the setting. So that raining ash thing might be intriguing, and it might get you to turn the page to find out why. But if the answer is, dry scientific information, as opposed to people coping with the raining ash, you're going to give up on the story pretty quickly, right?
And because it was Brandon Sanderson, he was probably doing a really good job of showing the setting through the character's opinion.
Right, exactly.
Right? So it's not just that it was raining ash, it was what the character thought about it. He thought that it was normal, right?
Right. It's the character interacting with a world that doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And you could open with strict setting with no people in it and hook a reader, but you're going to have to introduce that character, immediately within a couple of paragraphs. So you would provide the sort of tableau of this world, but then We need that.
But you can't really
piece.
show the setting without the character, right? Like, because you're in their point of view, and so when you're describing the setting, you're describing it from their point of view. So they come together.
Well, no, you have a narrative voice. So your narrator, think of the establishing shot like maybe in a Western movie where you see the horizon and the landscape, and maybe there are some cows or something out on the prairie and, a dried up riverbed. And so you get the mood set. This is isolation, this is loneliness, this is hardship, it's a hard life. So you could open with the narrative voice giving you the mood, and then you come in just like the camera and you show the character, you show the dude on his horse, right? Mm-hmm. And now you've got that person, the point of view within that world, and we know from the establishing shot, from the mood, that this is going to be a story of hardship, maybe man versus nature, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it is possible. I don't know examples.
I see that a lot more in movies than in books, though.
Right, but it doesn't mean you can't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it for more than a few paragraphs, because you really need to introduce that empathetic protagonist in order to hook a reader. Yeah. Character is paramount. It is the heart of your story.
Right. Yep.
So when you're establishing that character in the beginning and you're hooking that reader, like when you say we need a depth of character, like what is the part of your character, like thinking about it in terms of my own books, like what is the part of my main protagonist or the scene that I'm trying to show at the beginning, the character that's driving that, such as the antagonist in your prologue, that we want to get to in order to have that connection? Like at what point have you gone deep enough? Like, I guess is my question. Like,
Mm-hmm. Well, it really depends on your story and what you're trying to convey to the reader in that first moment. So if you look at Star Wars and forget the prologue with Princess Leia and the Stormtroopers, go to the opening, we'll call it Chapter 1, where you meet Luke on the farm with his uncle complaining about chores, right? Mm-hmm. We're being introduced to our protagonist, and he's relatable. He's any American teenager who'd rather go race with his buddies than help his uncle buy droids. Mm-hmm. So we know he's going to turn into something exceptional because we saw the prologue, and we know that big trouble on an epic scale is coming for him. But when we meet him, we are identifying with something completely normal, relatable. That could be you or me or my kid or my brother or anybody, right?
So you want to get down past the superficial into the things that make us want to have relationships with other people. So the part of a friendship where you're actually getting to know the person rather than like the acquaintance level stage with your character in the first chapter. So it's like skipping all of the niceties, I guess, if we're talking about it in terms of a relationship.
Well, it so depends on your story. If you're writing a thriller, you probably aren't going to start with the average kid on the page. Think of like Indiana Jones, and I'm using movies because more people have seen them than trying to pick a book, and hopefully a few people have read the same book. It doesn't open with Indy in the classroom with his young student batting her eyelids at him. It opens with him in the jungle going after the golden icon, the blow darts, the giant stone ball chasing him, and then the competitor taking the golden idol out of his hand just when you think he's safe. So it opens with, this is an action-adventure story. This is a very sexy, competent, masculine hero. There's going to be tons of danger in exotic locations. And then we get to see his mundane life as a professor. So what genre are you writing? What is your reader looking for when they open that book? Chapter 1 of The Murder in Skog Hall is introducing Jess and Skog Hall and Shakti and the house that's going to be haunted. So chapter 1 is much more like Indy in the classroom, but the prologue with the PTSD and the woman who's going to be the victim is like Indy in the jungle. Right? So you've got to factor all of those things into your opening. Right. And then provide depth with an empathetic character and intrigue or fascination.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Kathryn, like how deep is enough? I don't know. I don't know if there's like a meter we can say like 8 feet. Like it's, I don't know if we could do that. It's enough for your reader to like relate to them and to want to know more and to really understand the character, like who this person is, right? Like by 3 pages into chapter 1 of Murder in Skog Hall, I know exactly who Jess is. Right?
Exactly.
There's no question.
Damn.
Right. Well, I know her as a character. Like I know what's happened to her former married life, right? I know she got a new puppy. I know she's moving to the rural area of Minnesota or Wisconsin or somewhere in the Midwest, right? Like
Wisconsin,
I feel like I know her because we get so many details about her life, and not only about her life, but how she feels about it, right? Like even the part where she's like trying to figure out how to seatbelt Shakti into the car, and Shakti has like gotten tangled in the seatbelt. Like that gives me a really good sense of her character, and it's not far into the story. Like it's just a couple pages, maybe even the first page, right?
Right. Yeah. So gosh, this is such an interesting topic. Because as you were talking about Jess, Matt, I was thinking back to Indiana Jones and that question of depth. And like when we see him in the jungle, we don't get any depth. It's all action. It's when he's back on campus and he's in the classroom and then he's talking to his boss about his next mission when we see sort of his quieter, more considerate personality and his academic side come up. And then, later we see his romantic side and we see... So there is an unfolding over the course of the story, and with Jess, I took an approach of like, this is the person who's about to change. Her life is about to go sideways because of this haunting. But I did give you in the first chapter this whole like,
It's like the juxtaposition of it, right?
Right.
That really makes you wonder what's going to happen. But maybe with Indiana Jones they did that. I mean, I'm sure they did it on purpose too, where it's like first you see the action and then you see him teaching a classroom. So it's the depth comes from not just all of one or all of the other, but seeing them together, right? Or seeing them back to back and seeing like, oh, this person does have some depth. He's not just an action hero. He also is a professor and he also has this romance element. And they probably show you that in 5 minutes.
Well, you definitely know he's a romantic icon because the girl in the classroom in that first scene outside of the jungle is, has I love you written on her eyelids, which is a great moment. I think it goes back to intrigue and fascination. So to go back to your question, Kathryn, how deep do you go? You have to go deep enough to make the reader want to turn the page. And that's going to happen by raising questions that need to be answered and by creating character empathy. Right? So if you've got tension, we empathize with characters who are feeling tension. Like in the open of the Ariga project, Eliana, right? She is in the midst of this huge gala, and this isn't her thing. So she's there doing it because, it's her husband's party, and she's involved in it, and she's part of it. But she's not into hobnobbing. So there's tension there. It's like, I've got to go outside of myself. And everyone can relate to being in a social situation where you have to push your boundaries. So we empathize with her.
And you get to know her, like there's depth of character there because she clearly doesn't want to be doing this, right? And so like what she likes doing and what she doesn't like doing, and how she feels about all of the other people at the party and how she thinks that guy's a sleazeball and she kind of likes this person, so there's a lot of it's all about like how Eliana feels about the party, right? Which,
so you were doing kind of like I was doing in the first chapter of Skog Hall with the setup. So you go inside the point of view characters, and in the Eureka project, we're learning about these different players who will factor into the plot later. You know, the sleazeball and the politician and the foreign investor. And so you are learning about the world while you're empathizing with this protagonist whose life is about to change. And that's the crux of any opening. We're meeting someone that we need to invest in because that person's life is about to change and we want to go on that ride with that person.
Right. You have
and
to
the
care
intrigue
enough about it in the beginning.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the intrigue in that opening is because Eamon's about to unveil this huge machine and it's covered with a cloth and you don't know what it is. And that hopefully makes people think, oh, I like this character and I want to know what's happening there. So they keep reading. So it has like the fascination and the intrigue.
Right. And the depth. I think the depth is the thing that makes us empathize. So you need enough depth of character to empathize. And different books do it differently. Saturday by Ian McEwan? I think it's Ian McEwan. I was going to say like Ewan McGregor, Ian McClellan. Like what person is this? Yeah.
Not Gandalf.
Not Gandalf. Yeah, that famous writer, you know, Gandalf. Yeah. It opens with a guy waking up at like 3 a.m. or something and getting out of bed and looking out of his window. And it's a very slow, placid opening. There's a lot of setting, a lot of mood and introduction to this man who you find out is like a brain surgeon and his perfect wife is still sleeping in the bed. And, you know, he's looking out the window of his London home on the square that is so peaceful. And, you know, you're like, okay, so this guy is rich and has a perfect life and, you know, an awesome career. And he's going to go play like handball with his friend after breakfast. Like, but there's tension there because, you know, all this perfection is going to change. If it doesn't change, we don't have a story. So do I care about him because he's relatable? Well, my life is nothing like his. But I'm curious about how all this perfection is going to be damaged over the course of the story.
And if you like that kind of story, like the setting description is beautiful.
It is.
Right? So if it's your genre and you're curious about that guy even a little bit, you're probably going to keep reading.
Right. And it's also, you know, it's considered literary fiction, but it's also quite a thrilling, dramatic story with tons of human conflict. You know, his work has quite a bit of action in it, even though it seems to open with these very mundane, you know, peaceful almost worlds. Those worlds become invaded and cracked open. So
it's almost like he just likes to destroy things. He's just getting you set up for destroying it later.
Yeah, he does, definitely.
Ian McEwan.
Ian McEwan, yes. I have to. Pretty sure that's like which one? Yeah, I think you're right, Ian McEwan. And what was the one? The title of his book about the hot air balloon that crashes?
Oh no.
It's the same kind of thing where you start with very normal people living, you know, lives with relationships, with marriages, just very sort of mundane. Anybody can relate to that. And then some incident happens that just breaks worlds apart.
So the one with the air balloon on the cover is called Enduring Love.
Enduring Love. Yep, that's it. So, other thoughts about openings?
They're hard.
They're hard. Okay, so our takeaways. First, read a lot of openings. And with free book samples, that's really easy to do. So go read a bunch of traditionally published openings and different genre openings and study them. See what hooks you in. See what gets you empathizing with the character and what's creating tension in that opening. The tension is some promise of change, of danger that's, about to launch this journey. So you need to have depth of character to create empathy. You need to have dramatic tension or a sense of stakes. Something is about to change. You need to create intrigue, open-ended questions that hook a reader into turning the page to get those questions answered. Did I miss anything?
I think you got it.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you for watching. This has been another StoryWorks Roundtable, and you can find all of our recordings at wordessential.com/StoryWorks Roundtable.